The first red flag came in a bright pink envelope. I had just finished mowing my lawn when I saw it stuffed in my mailbox, bold letters on the front: "Urgent HOA matter response required." I live in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town, not some gated suburb. My name's Oliver Grady, and I bought my house 3 years ago free and clear, no HOA. I made sure of it. That was non-negotiable after the nightmare my brother went through with his HOA fining him for planting sunflowers. Curious and annoyed, I opened the envelope. The letter inside was official-looking, with a gold foil HOA logo at the top and the signature of one Janelle Fairburn, president of the Briar Hills Homeowners Association. It said I owed $25,000 in back dues. For a neighborhood I wasn't part of. According to them, I had been benefiting from community landscaping, security patrols, and recreational facilities for 4 years. That was funny, considering I had my own lawn guy. No security presence ever drove by, and the only recreational facility was a broken swing set in someone else's backyard. The letter ended with a threat. Failure to remit payment within 30 days will result in legal action and a property lien. I nearly laughed. Then I saw they'd CC'd a lawyer. The next morning, as I was sipping my coffee on the porch, a pearl-white Lexus rolled up. Out stepped a woman dressed like she was late for a country club brunch. Short blonde bob, giant sunglasses, clipboard in hand. She marched across my grass like she owned it. "You must be Oliver," she said, flashing a tight smile that didn't touch her eyes. "I'm Janelle Fairburn. I wanted to give you a chance to resolve this matter before we escalate it." I stayed seated. "I'm not in your HOA," she scoffed. "Oh, you are." Briar Hills expanded its boundaries 2 years ago. We voted on it. Your property is included. You can't just vote to annex people's houses into your cult. Her nostrils flared. It's a community association, not a cult. And yes, we can. The majority voted, and the new plat map includes your lot. You've been benefiting from our services. What services? I cut her off. I mow my own lawn, fix my own fence, and I haven't seen a single security patrol unless you count the raccoons that prowl around at night. She pressed her lips together and scribbled something on her clipboard. Fine. Refuse to cooperate. But don't be surprised when legal action is taken. This will cost you more than dues if it goes to court. She turned and stomped back to her Lexus. I watched her drive off, then walked straight inside and pulled out my deed, property title, and the original neighborhood agreement I signed when I bought the place. Not a single mention of any HOA. I even called the county records office. They confirmed. My property wasn't and had never been inside Briar Hills jurisdiction. They had no authority over me, so what the hell were they playing at? That night, I installed 2 new security cameras, one facing my driveway, one over the front door. I had a feeling this wasn't the last I'd see of Janelle or her clipboard, and I was right. 3 days later, I came home to find a red tag taped to my garage door. It was printed on cheap stock paper, but the words were bold and clear. Final notice, property in violation. Lien proceedings initiated. There was some legal jargon underneath, followed by a claim number and a contact name, someone named Mason Corrick, apparently the HOA's legal counsel. I peeled the tag off and walked straight inside. My pulse was steady, but my jaw clenched. They weren't just bluffing anymore, they were trying to fake their way into financially cornering me. Still holding the tag, I dialed the county clerk's office again. When I asked if any liens had been filed on my property, the clerk paused. "Actually, yes," she said. "Filed yesterday. It's pending certification, but it's listed under the Briar Hills Civic Association. Are you disputing it?" "Absolutely," I said, already grabbing my folder of documents. "I'm bringing papers down right now." I spent the next hour with a municipal records officer named Deidre, who walked me through the process to challenge a fraudulent lien. She listened carefully as I showed her my original title documents, pulled up the plat maps, and pointed out that my property line was clearly outside their boundaries. "That's not just overreach," she said. "That's intentional misrepresentation." If they submitted this under oath, that's criminal. She took a photo of the red tag and entered it into their system. You need to file a formal dispute with the county recorder. Once it's in, the lien will be frozen until a hearing. I filed it that day, but I wasn't done. That evening, I drove to the local law library downtown. I'd taken a few paralegal courses back in my 20s, not enough to practice law, but enough to know the basics. And right now, I needed more than basics. In the dusty second-floor archives, I found a binder full of case law on HOA boundary disputes. One stood out: McClellan vs. Cedar View Estates, where a similar association had illegally annexed homes to increase dues revenue. The court not only voided the liens but awarded the homeowner triple damages for fraud and harassment. I took notes, lots of them. The next morning, I sent a certified letter to the HOA's listed mailing address. It contained a formal cease and desist, a notice of pending legal counteraction for fraudulent lien filing, and a demand for immediate withdrawal of all claims. I copied both the county recorder and the city council's legal department. Less than 4 hours later, I got a knock at the door. This time it wasn't Janelle. It was a man in a too-tight blazer with a Bluetooth headset and a clipboard. His handshake was weak, and his voice had the oily tone of someone used to fast talking through bad situations. "Mr. Grady, I'm Mason Corrick, counsel for the Briar Hills Civic Association. You're the one who filed the lien," he shifted slightly. "I'm the one who processed the paperwork. I'd like to discuss a resolution that avoids unnecessary litigation." "There's no resolution to be had," I said. "You filed a fraudulent claim on a property you don't control. That's criminal. I've already reported it." He glanced at the camera above my door. Perhaps we got ahead of ourselves. There was a clerical mix-up in the plat registry. Nothing was done with malicious intent. "You submitted a sworn statement to the county saying my home was under your jurisdiction. That's not clerical." He looked past me into the house, probably trying to gauge whether I had legal counsel yet. Then he said something that made my blood go cold. "The association has a long-term development plan. Expansion is inevitable. It's easier when everyone's already on board." So this was about pressuring me until I caved. He didn't answer. I stepped forward. "You have 24 hours to withdraw the lien and issue a written apology. If not, the complaint goes to the DA's office." Corrick's jaw tightened. "You don't want to escalate this further, Mr. Grady?" "I already have." I shut the door. That night, my security footage caught something disturbing. Around midnight, a figure in a hoodie walked up my driveway and sprayed quick bursts of black paint across both my cameras. The footage cut out right after. But they made one mistake. I had a third camera hidden under the porch light, aimed at the lawn. It caught the car. They came in a silver Range Rover with a license plate partially visible. After some zoom and frame adjustments, I got 5 of the 7 characters. I called the police. Officer Dana Morales came out the next morning. She was sharp, no nonsense, and took one look at the footage before whistling low. "Looks like someone didn't want to be seen." "You said this started after a property dispute." I gave her everything: the documents, the tag, the footage, even the notes from the law library. When I showed her Corrick's visit on camera, she raised an eyebrow. "Did he threaten you?" "Not directly." "But he hinted this was part of a bigger plan." She nodded. "I'll run that plate, and I'm forwarding this to our white-collar crimes unit. Filing a false lien is a felony if done knowingly." That afternoon, I got a call from Deidre at the clerk's office. "You're going to want to hear this," she said. "Another homeowner came in today, same issue, exact same red tag. They're not part of the HOA either." "How many properties were added in this boundary expansion?" "From what I can tell, 9, all outside the original limits." "And none of them signed any agreement?" My stomach turned. This wasn't accidental. This was a coordinated land grab. I spent the next 2 days knocking on doors. I met 5 of the other homeowners. Most were older, retired, or just assumed they had no choice but to pay. One couple had already written a check for $12,000 just to avoid court fees. I explained the situation, showed them the case law, and shared Officer Morales's findings. By the end of the weekend, we had a group of 6 homeowners ready to file a joint complaint. We hired a local attorney, Gregory Powell, a pit bull in a suit who used to work for the state attorney general's office. The moment he saw the documents, he shook his head. "They're cooked. This is fraud, plain and simple. You've got a solid case for damages and maybe even criminal charges if the DA bites." He filed the civil suit Monday morning. By Wednesday, the HOA's board had gone into full panic mode. Janelle called each of us personally, offering to resolve the misunderstanding if we dropped the filing. Nobody did. That Friday, the county recorder sent notice that the lien on my house had been officially nullified due to fraudulent basis, and then came the real blow. Officer Morales called again. "We identified the vehicle from your footage. Belongs to a board member's son, 18, still living at home. We're charging him with trespassing and property damage. We're also opening a broader investigation into the HOA's financial practices." I leaned back in my chair and looked out at my freshly mowed lawn. They came at me with fake dues, a forged map, and a lien they had no right to file. I came back with cameras, the law, and a community that stopped being afraid, and we were just getting started. 2 weeks after the lawsuit was filed, everything accelerated. Our attorney, Gregory Powell, had sent subpoenas to the HOA for financial records, meeting minutes, and any documentation related to their so-called boundary expansion. They stonewalled at first, claiming some files had been misplaced during a recent system update. Gregory wasn't having it. He filed a motion to compel, and the judge granted it with a warning. If the HOA couldn't produce the records within 10 days, they'd be in contempt on day 9. A courier dropped off 3 thick boxes at Gregory's office. Within hours, he called me. "They sent everything," he said. "But they didn't look closely before they did. You're going to want to come in for this." I met him that evening in his office, where he laid out a series of internal memos, email printouts, and a spreadsheet that practically glowed with wrongdoing. The memos were the worst. One, dated 6 months earlier, was from Janelle to the rest of the board. It read, "If we incorporate the 9 outer properties into our jurisdiction, we can stabilize the reserve fund without raising dues on existing members. Push the increased security coverage narrative. Most won't fight it." If any do, Corrick has a workaround. Gregory pointed to the spreadsheet. This shows they were using the added dues to cover a shortfall in landscaping contracts and board stipends. And here's the kicker: they paid Corrick a discretionary bonus 2 weeks after you got that first envelope. I read the memo again, slower this time. It wasn't just unethical, it was calculated theft. And when you take someone's property under false legal pretenses, that crosses into criminal territory. We turned the documents over to Officer Morales and the county prosecutor's office. Within days, a formal investigation into the HOA's financial conduct was opened. Grand jury subpoenas went out. Janelle and Corrick both lawyered up fast, but it didn't help. The paper trail was undeniable. At the same time, word was spreading fast through the neighborhood. Someone leaked the lawsuit to the local paper, and within 48 hours, a reporter from Channel 7 was knocking on my door. I agreed to an interview outside in front of my house with the redacted documents in hand. When the segment aired, it lit a fire under the whole community. The headline was brutal. Homeowner targeted by HOA scheme $25K demand over fake jurisdiction. They even showed a clip from my security footage, the one with the teenager vandalizing my cameras, blurred for privacy, but damning nonetheless. The fallout was immediate. 3 more homeowners came forward, each with similar stories, and all of them had paid. One was a widowed nurse in her 60s who drained her savings to fork over $8,000 after threats of foreclosure. Her voice cracked on the news when she said, "They told me if I didn't pay, I'd lose my home. I believed them." That quote made it into the prosecutor's press release the following week when they announced formal charges against Janelle Corrick and the HOA treasurer, a man named Vincent Leary. The charges included conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false legal instruments, and attempted grand theft. Janelle was arrested at her country club. Corrick turned himself in the next morning, flanked by 2 attorneys. Vincent tried to claim ignorance, but a forensic audit showed he'd personally authorized the disbursement of funds siphoned from the coerced dues. The board collapsed overnight. The vice president resigned publicly on social media, saying he'd been misled and deeply ashamed. The remaining members scattered. The HOA's bank accounts were frozen pending litigation, but we weren't done. Gregory filed an amended complaint seeking treble damages for each of the 6 plaintiffs, citing emotional distress, legal costs, and lost wages. When the court date arrived, we walked in as a unified front 6 homeowners who had refused to be bullied. The defense tried to argue that the board had acted in good faith and had simply misunderstood their authority to expand. Gregory shut that down with the memo. The judge didn't even let it go to jury. In his ruling, he wrote, "This was not a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate and coordinated action to financially exploit residents outside the HOA's jurisdiction. The defendants weaponized legal processes to create a false appearance of authority. The court finds in favor of the plaintiffs. We were awarded full damages plus attorney fees." For my part, that meant not just the voiding of the lien, but a payout of $75,000. The county prosecutor wasn't finished either. After the criminal case wrapped, Janelle pled guilty to 2 felony counts and was sentenced to 9 months in county jail and 5 years probation. Corrick lost his license to practice law. Vincent was fined heavily and barred from serving on any board for a decade. But the most satisfying part wasn't the money or the convictions. It was the moment I saw the new sign go up at the entrance to the neighborhood. Under community oversight, no HOA governing authority. A group of residents had voted to dismantle the HOA entirely, replacing it with a voluntary neighborhood council that served only in an advisory capacity, with open books and quarterly town halls. I was asked to join the new council. I declined. I didn't want power, I just wanted peace. And now, finally, I had it. The house was quiet again. No more pink envelopes, no more clipboard inspections, no more threats disguised as friendly notices. Just the sound of sprinklers, the occasional bark of a dog, and the distant hum of a lawnmower. One evening, as I was finishing a beer on the porch, the nurse who'd paid $8,000 walked by with her dog. She paused at the gate. "You know," she said, "if you hadn't stood up to them, I think they'd still be doing it, to all of us." I nodded. "They picked the wrong guy." She smiled and walked on. Behind her, the neighborhood looked exactly the same, but it felt completely different. It was nearly 4 months after the court ruling when I got the call from Officer Morales again this time. Not about a new crime, but a question. "Oliver," she said, "do you remember if any of the documents you submitted mentioned a company called Greenline Property Consultants?" I paused, thinking back. That name isn't familiar. Why? Something came up in a separate case. Thought I'd run it by you just in case. By now, I trusted Morales enough to know if she was asking, it wasn't casual. I told her I'd check through my scanned files. A few hours later, I found it. A single mention in a budget line buried in the HOA's ledger, Greenline Prop. Consulting Boundary Analysis Services. I sent it over. The next day, Gregory called me, voice low and deliberate. "I just got off the phone with the county prosecutor. They're widening the investigation. Turns out Greenline was more than just a consulting firm. It's a shell company set up by Vincent Leary 2 years ago." I leaned forward in my chair. For what? To fabricate property assessments and neighborhood maps. They were creating fake plat overlays to justify the expansion. This wasn't just a corrupt HOA trying to scrape together funds. This was engineered fraud, using falsified documents to steal from people under the guise of legality. It explained the confidence they'd had when they came after me. They thought their fake maps would hold up if challenged, Gregory continued. The DA's office is assembling a task force. They're looking at whether any of the officers personally profited beyond the dues. By the time the grand jury convened again, the list of charges had more than doubled. Janelle, already serving her sentence, was hit with additional indictments for wire fraud and conspiracy. Corrick faced obstruction charges for knowingly submitting forged documents to the recorder's office. Vincent? They found offshore accounts tied to the Green Line shell, each funded from the association's reserve transfers. He was arrested at a private airstrip outside county limits with a one-way ticket and a briefcase full of burner phones. The news went public in a televised press conference. The county prosecutor stood between two state investigators, laying it all out. The HOA leadership had orchestrated a scheme to expand their financial control by manufacturing jurisdiction, threatening homeowners, and laundering the proceeds through fraudulent entities. They called it one of the most organized residential fraud cases in county history. After the updated charges were filed, I was asked to testify before the grand jury. I walked into that courtroom wearing the same jacket I'd worn the day Janelle first showed up on my lawn. I brought the original property survey, the cease and desist letter, and the camera footage of the board member's son vandalizing my cameras. When I finished, one of the jurors asked, "Why didn't you just pay the dues and walk away?" I answered without hesitation. Because that's how they get away with it. They count on people being too tired or scared to fight back. That afternoon, the grand jury returned indictments on 20 counts against the 3 former board members and Corrick. The charges spanned from criminal conspiracy and racketeering to falsifying public records. The DA filed for asset seizure on the Green Line accounts and the HOA's reserve fund. The money was ordered into escrow pending civil restitution. Meanwhile, the Replacement Community Council, the advisory group that had taken the HOA's place, began holding open forums. I attended the first one out of curiosity. It was held in the elementary school gym, folding chairs lined up in uneven rows. No banners, no gavel-wielding president. Just neighbors asking questions and volunteers offering updates on trash pickup schedules and holiday events. One of the new council members, a retired firefighter named Marlene, stood up after the updates and said, "We want to create a fund for anyone who lost money because of the fraud. Once the court releases the seized assets, that's our priority." A few people clapped. I didn't, but I nodded. It was the first time I'd seen something resembling real accountability around here. Weeks passed. Then came the civil settlement. Gregory called me in to sign the final paperwork. The court had processed the restitution claims, and each of us, those who had been targeted by the fake jurisdiction, received a portion of the seized funds. After legal fees and damages, I walked away with just under $110,000. I knew exactly what to do with it. The following day, I signed a contract with a local contractor to install a solar roof, upgrade my security system to full perimeter coverage, and add a small greenhouse in the backyard, something I'd always wanted but never had the budget for. Call it a reward for surviving a war I never asked to fight. About a month later, I was in the greenhouse, potting my first set of tomato seedlings when a letter arrived in my mailbox. No envelope, just a folded note, hand-delivered. It read, "To the man who reminded us what standing up really looks like, thank you. You didn't just win your case. You gave the rest of us our voice back." Underneath were 6 signatures. My neighbors. The same ones who'd once been too afraid to speak up. I folded the note and set it on my kitchen counter. Then I stepped outside and took a long look at the street, quiet, peaceful. Every house with its curtains drawn open, not closed in fear, no more clipboard inspections, no more surprise fees, no more creeping jurisdiction. The HOA had tried to rewrite the rules of ownership. They built lies off the backs of good people, hoping intimidation would hold the structure together. It collapsed because one person said no and then others joined in. And now the only signs around here are yard sale posters and lost cat flyers. The way a neighborhood should be.